maxing rotations. That's most of the skill expression for Neuvillette. Obviously, you can position Neuvillette. If you're on PC, it's much easier to do the spin to win strategy. Same with mobile, you can kind of swipe to get the power wash going on all the enemies. And if you're on controller, I think you can gyroscope, but I don't have that turned on for my controller, so I just kind of play them normally. So you can probably optimize Neuvillette more than me, so yay. For future prospects, I think Neuvillette has incredible future prospects because he doesn't, like, Zhongli is technically still part of his best team, but there's tons of room for a future HP buffer, off-field pyro, just more off-field supports in general, just different buffers that, because so I think his future potential is even higher, especially if you're a player willing to go for a C1. Just know that even at C0, I still think he's the strongest DPS in the game, so don't feel baited to go for his constellations, don't feel the FOMO, and again, I don't think he's that much better than other DPS characters, especially at C0, so you really shouldn't feel FOMO to get him if, like, he's not your favorite playstyle and if he's not your favorite character design. For Overworld, he's one of the best Overworld characters, honestly, because he's self-healing, and he just does tons of raw damage, so he can just solo the Overworld, no problem. There you go. Let me know your thoughts on Neuvillette. If you're going to go for him, good luck on your polls. Take care. Bye for now.
All right, you have $1,300 to spend on an Android slab phone in 2024. Why would you get any other phone? No, seriously. Why would you get any other phone? This S24 Ultra has taken the best things from every other ultra high-end phone and stuffed them into one place. So anything that you could possibly value, it has pushed to the max. And there's just multiple cherries on top, just sprinkled all over the place. This phone sets the tone for 2024. So the formula for Samsung's Ultra phones has evolved a little bit over the years. At first, it was just the most numbers, the biggest megapixel count, the most zoom and all that. Then it added the S Pen and got a little more refined, and it replaced the Note. Now it's just everything. It's just everything in one place. It's all the best hardware, all the best software I can think of, all in one phone. So on the outside, like I said in my early impressions, this phone looks almost the same as last year's phone. But if you think this phone is almost the same as last year's phone, turns out you're missing a lot. So the more you use this phone, the more you look for weaknesses, the more impressive it gets. So maybe you're a screen snob, right? You like to pixel peep. Maybe you were thinking about getting one of the ultra high-end Oppo or Xiaomi phones just for an amazing screen. All right, well, look no further. Literally one of the best screens in any phone. S24 Ultra has dropped in a class-leading 6.8-inch Quad HD AMOLED display, and it is awesome. These Ultra phones have had, 120 Hz LTPO for a while, and they've been this really sharp Quad HD for a while now too. But now on top of that, two new things. One is it's completely flat, and two is it's much brighter. So there's been this whole new batch of like 2,500 plus nit phones in the past couple months that I've seen. This, I think, is the best looking one that I've seen so far. So now it's up to a max 2,600 nits, which is awesome outdoors or anywhere, but it also gets extremely dim at night too, without any of the weird banding I've seen in some other phones. And they flattened the display completely and brought the display right up to the very corners with some of the thinnest bezels we've seen all the way around. Plus there's also this new anti-reflective coating on this Gorilla Glass armor that makes a noticeable difference with certain light hitting it at off-axis angles. And then there is a crazy fast ultrasonic fingerprint reader underneath to top it all off. And maybe I wish the touch target was a little bit bigger, but that's about it. Honestly, if you're a screen snob, it doesn't really get better than this one right here. This is the phone you should get. Okay, so what if your primary concern is battery life? Well, you could always get the Energizer phone that we saw at CES at one time, but as far as reasonably sized flagship slab phones go, it doesn't get much better than this. Again, they're keeping a 5,000 mAh battery in one of the best performing battery phones from the past few years, despite making it thinner and keeping the S Pen. So you might as well get this one. Still got 45 watt wired charging, you still have 25 watt wireless charging, and just battery life wise, I was able to have long days with no problems with 6 hours plus screen on time. I was able to baby it into getting 2 full days. That's at 1440p, at 120 hertz, and with high brightness use. So yeah, why get anything else? So okay, what if then it's just performance is the main thing that you care about? Okay, so we're seeing all these phones with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 starting to come out, and they're looking really good. Great high-end performance. There's efficiency gains all over the place. Plus, this phone pairs it with 12 gigs of RAM, and it is a multitasking champ. And if it's a stylus you're into, I already know you aren't really considering any other phone. The S Pen is basically the only high-end stylus still going in slab smartphones. It's really good for note-taking, drawing, highlighting, all that stuff. But if you're like me and you hardly ever use that, there's still the gaming performance and the everyday performance. There's the newly added ray tracing, plus a 90% larger vapor chamber to cool the phone for much longer stuff. Turns out it's an A+. Now, you could always get a gaming phone and squeeze 5 to 10% more frames out of a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 with some huge badass cooling setup, and that's great. But then you also have to accept all of the sacrifices that come with said gaming phone over this. And do you really want those extra frames that bad? Depends on who you ask. Okay, cameras. There's a lot of other phones out there that you could buy if your $1,300 specifically has to go to the best cameras. The Pixel just won the blind camera test. Sony has the best manual mode. Like, there's other great camera systems. But here's a way to simplify it. I think in evaluating smartphone cameras, there's basically 2 ways to review them. There's the utility, the actual technical evaluation, and the aesthetics, the art of it, the subjectivity part. And I think utility-wise, like on paper, specs-wise, this camera's got it all. Like you've seen this camera right before, there's 4 cameras on the back of this phone. Turns out they're basically the same cameras as last year's S23 Ultra, except for one. So there's a primary camera, an ultra-wide, and a pair of 2 different telephoto cameras. The primary camera is still the ridiculous 200 megapixel sensor with all the same pros and cons. It's consistent and versatile across the board. It has great dynamic range. It's a quick shooter with quick autofocus, and it's also always binning down to 12 megapixels, and you should almost never switch it to the 200 megapixel mode unless you have incredible lighting. It has an ultra-wide with a bit of distortion near the edges, but it's actually meaningfully wider than the primary camera, so it's really fun to shoot with, even though the automatic macro mode from it looks like trash, and you should just turn it off anytime it turns your pictures from this to this, pro tip. And then it has a medium range 3x telephoto camera that kicks in smoothly and matches the colors and exposure from the main camera really well. And so the one new thing in hardware this year is they've gone from a 10 megapixel 10x camera to a 50 megapixel 5x camera. So technically shorter optical zoom range, but I would say with the extra resolution, it is actually more powerful. It means all the photos in the gap between 5x and 10x look sharper than last year. And then you can literally put the 10x photos side by side from the S23 Ultra and the S24 Ultra, and the new 5x cropped in actually looks better. Plus you can still zoom all the way in and shoot at 100x if you still want to take ultra stable pictures of faraway objects like the moon. But basically what I'm saying is, utility-wise, this camera system checks every single box. It has everything. So from there, you get into the more subjective aesthetic differences, which you could always lean one way or the other. I mean, looking at these photos, they're still very much Samsung's slightly extra process looking, a little bit extra contrasty, a little bit higher exposure, a little brighter colors. That still happens with these photos. So you could still convince yourself to lean Pixel or even iPhone. But if you just want to be able to check every single box, why look anywhere else? Honestly, the changes that you notice more aside from the actual camera quality are just like features using it. Like the S24 Ultra shoots everything HDR by default now. It's actually in Google's new Ultra HDR format. So when you have, specular highlights or big dynamic range differences in a photo, it will tastefully crank up that stuff for a more dramatic looking picture on the phone screen, similar to what Pixel and iPhone already do. And this passes through all the way from capturing the photo to viewing it in the gallery, and then one more step to actually publishing it on social media. So Samsung has worked with Instagram and Snapchat for native quality photo and video uploading pipelines. Because at the end of the day, once you take the photo, what are you 99% of the time planning to do with it? Share it. And I think this is important for a lot of people. This is one of the reasons I have carried an iPhone for years. Is one of the things you can always count on is the photos and videos in third-party apps are going to look just as good as if they were captured in the main camera. And now you can actually say